Hi everyone, welcome to the Mathemagic channel. Today we're going to work on square roots and how to figure them out. So although this is a little bit funny, this is not what a square root is. Now before we learn about square roots, it would be really great if you knew how to square your numbers. So here are the square numbers from 1 through 15. I would encourage you to pause the video right now and do all your squares from 1 through 15. So go ahead and pause the video, try this out. And so here are all your squares from 1 through 15. I think the first 10 are pretty straightforward because you've probably learned them as part of your times tables. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared 36, 7 squared 49, 8 squared 64, 9 squared 81, 10 squared is 100, 11 times 11 is in your 11's times tables, and that's 121. 12 squared is 144, that's in the corner of your times tables, so it's usually the last number we learn to multiply. 13 squared is 169. Now for 13 squared, you can remember that it's 130 plus 39. So you have a 2-block calculation, 130 plus 39, which gives you 169. And for 196, it's kind of the reverse. If you notice, you'll have 169 and 196. So 13 and 14 are a little bit difficult to learn, but these are the two numbers that you generally need to learn. And for 15 squared, 225, that's a block of 150 and a block of 75. So that's pretty straightforward to remember. We'll also have a technique to square numbers that end in 5s to remember how to find 225. So square numbers are important because 8 squared is 8 times itself, which is 8 times 8, which gives you 64. And when you look at the square root of 64, well, that's reversing that process and trying to figure out which number times itself will give you 64. And the number which times itself gives you 64 is 8. So here are 3 short questions which you can try to see if you can figure out the square root of a perfect square. So go ahead and try these. So looking at these 3 questions, the square root of 36 is 6, the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 144 is 12. So well done if you've done these 3 questions correctly. And now let's look at when things get a little bit trickier. So I've put 3 new questions up on the board now, and I think you might notice that inside of square root of 72, there is a 36. And inside of the square root of 50, there is a 25. And inside of square root of 288, there is 144. So what do we need to do here to extract those perfect squares? And this is where surds get a little bit tricky, but we're going to look at it together now. Now, if we look at how to do these questions here, you'll notice in the first question, I have the square root of 72, which I can break down as 36 times 2. And so I've spotted my perfect square, which is 36. Now, I know that the square root of 36 is 6. And so I can say that this is 6 root 2 because we have learned our square numbers all the way through to 15, right? So in my second question, I can see that I have the square root of 50, which is actually the square root of 25 times 2, and 25 is in red. And as you square root 25, you get 5. So I can put the 5 outside. It becomes an integer, a whole number value. And so I have 5, which is outside, and root 2 with the 2 stuck inside the square root. So if you're not a perfect square, you cannot leave the square root. But if you are, you can go. So you're allowed to leave. And so that's what happened with 25. In the third question, we have the square root of 288. So again, that's 2 times 144. And the 144 can get square rooted and become a 12, which is super. So we take the 12 outside and we end up with 12 root 2. Okay, so if you guys managed to understand everything up to now, that's super amazing. And what would be great and even more amazing is to do these 5 practice questions together. So go ahead, pause the video, try these 5 questions, and we'll do the corrections right after. And here are the corrections. In the first question, you have the square root of 28. There was a 4 times a 7. 7 is prime, so 7 times 4 is 28. The 4 can go out, and the square root of 4 is 2. In the second question, you had the square root of 80, which is a little bit tricky. So I guess you could have said that you could take a 4 out and say it's 4 times 20, and then take a 4 out again. Or you could have realized that 80 is 16 times 5, and 16 is a perfect square in itself. which is 4, so 4 root 5. In the third question, you have the square root of 45. Now, 45 is 9 times 5. 5 is prime. 9 square rooted is 3. So this was a pretty straightforward question. In question 4, you have the square root of 90. 90 is 9 times 10. Now, that's 3 root 10. We're tempted to think that inside of 10, there's another perfect square, but there isn't because it's 5 times 2, and 5 times 2 is not a perfect square. So it's just 3 root 10 for that one. And in the fifth question, you have the root of 12, which is 4 times 3. Now, 3 times 4 is the only way you can factorize 12 with a perfect square, and so you can take the 4 out and say that that's 2 root 3. All right, and if you've managed to do all these questions properly, that's absolutely outstanding. Well done for sticking through the video with me and doing these questions today. Remember that the whole skill here is to extract the perfect square. So whenever you see a surd, ask yourself, can I see a perfect square inside of that? And so it's very important that you would learn your square numbers all the way through to 15, maybe even 20 if you wanted to push the envelope a little bit further. And when you see a surd question, try and spot the perfect square, take it out and simplify it. Make sure you practice a little bit. So if you see some questions from school or in a book that you have access to, then go ahead and practice those so that you get really good. Remember, practice makes perfect. Anyway, well done for today. Thank you for watching the Mathemagic channel today. Make sure you follow us, like and subscribe, as we'll be putting up more videos related to surds and harder questions in the future for you to try and practice and get better at these. So until next time, remember, maths comes easy when you know what you're doing. Bye-bye.